welcome to my talk today. Thank you so much for coming. This is actually my first ever in-person presentation, so I'm in no way completely nervous. But what an amazing audience to do it in front of. Just looking at all your super smart faces is giving me a lift, because I've done a whole bunch of public speaking to a webcam, and you get nothing back. So I want to celebrate this fact by just asking you all a really quick question. And it's this. Have you ever experienced a change at work? Right? Maybe your workload changed, maybe your team changed, maybe you changed jobs. Just put your hand up if you experienced a change at work. Amazing, you're in the right room. Hurdle 1 cleared. So my name's Helen Scott. I've been in tech about 20 years now, and I have experienced a lot of change throughout that time. And I haven't always been great at responding to change. In fact, sometimes I've been downright awful at responding to change, and that has had an adverse effect on my career as a result. So I created this presentation because I needed to change. I needed to learn how to cope better with change because it was screwing me over at times. And a lot of the tips and tricks that you're going to see in this presentation are the learnings from that. And I'm going to apologize for the very unpolished slides right now because they're nowhere near as good as Kim's. Right, let's see if I can get this thing to work. Oh, I can. Oh, very good. OK. Right, first up, what is change? Now, when I don't know something, I go to Google. And it's what we all do, right? And I went to Google and I was like, so what is change? And Google went, oh, I don't really know. I'm like, what do you mean you don't know? You're Google. You know more about me than I know about me. That's not how we play this game. But what Google did tell me was there's something called change management. And change management is a thing that some companies put into place to walk a change through an organization. Sometimes it's successful, sometimes it's not. They're like, we're making a change. And then they spin up this change management organization. I did also learn that change is a process, first and foremost. So it can be very sudden. That's kind of when somebody whips the rug out from under you and you're left sitting on the floor wondering what the hell happened. It can be very stretched out. You can see that train coming down the track for miles. It can be positive, it can be negative, the impact on you. It can be anywhere in between. That's just a scale at the end of the day. But what I want to talk about today is change specifically in our industry and how that can make us feel, because I'm pretty sure, last time I checked, we are all human beings. And we experience a range of emotions when change comes along, especially in our industry. And I don't know if you've noticed, but it's a really fast-moving industry. Now, I know you've all had a really busy day, and you're after lunch, so you're all kind of sat there going, oh, digesting. So I want to give you your takeaway now. And the takeaway is this. When it comes to change, it might not feel like it, but you are in control. Okay? So when it comes to change, it might not feel like it, but you are in control. Okay. Ah, yes. Why is change so hard? I'm not going to ask the question, but if I was to ask the question, and if I was to say to you, put your hand up if you find change at work easy to deal with, I don't think many hands would go up. And if you are one of those people who put your hand up, kudos to you, because I'm terrible at it. So most of us find change really, really hard to deal with at work. So I've been doing a bit of research to understand why that is, because like I said, it's kind of been not doing wonders for my career at times. And what I found out was there are a couple of reasons. When we experience change, we have a psychological response to that change. And I'm going to explain what that looks like in a moment. We are creatures of habit. And if you look at our evolution, it's a lot safer if we know where our next meal's coming from. You can also, I'm a bit of a word nerd. I've been a technical writer for a lot of my career. So I love the fact that you can see this played out in the English language. Right? We have phrases such as, out of the frying pan into the fire, and the grass isn't always greener on the other side, or grass if you're northern. I'm a southerner living in the north. I get so confused. But we see this played out in the idioms of the English language as well. But this psychological response that we experience, I want to explain it with my little puppy. this is Artemis. He's 3 months old tomorrow. He's a little shit. I love him very much. But when something changes in his little world, he loses his tiny mind. He will start simultaneously jumping on all 4 feet. I have no idea how the physics works, but he will start jumping on all 4 feet. He will turn and be completely stunned and surprised that he has a tail every time. And then he will proceed to chase the tail that he's surprised he even owns. He will bark. He might even do a wee on the floor if it's a big change, hoping for one of them when I go home today. But what he experiences is just this massive rush of emotions. Now, of course, we're human beings. Most of us don't turn and check that we have a tail, and hopefully we don't wheel on the floor either. But we do experience fear, excitement, joy, frustration, and that all comes out at once, and you're kind of left going, ah. And that's certainly what I've come to understand that I have struggled to deal with at times when I get this massive influx of emotions. I'm like, oh God, I need to sort all you lot out. So to deal with that rush of emotions, that big psychological hit, we can use something called a coping mechanism. Now, you've probably heard the phrase, and I just want to bust one myth here and now. Even if you can see a change coming down the tracks, you still need a coping mechanism. Because when that change happens, you'll still experience something that perhaps you weren't expecting. You might feel feelings that you weren't expecting and you haven't planned for. So you still need some sort of coping mechanism. Anybody want to guess the decade this photo was taken in? Be nice, because the little one in the cot is me. No one is that brave. Interesting. This is what the 70s looked like, people. The brown carpet, the brown curtains. So that's me, and that's my big sister. And the reason I have this photo here is to talk to you about coping mechanisms. Now, when I was 8 or 9, my granddad was very sick. He was dying. And I can remember going to my mum and saying, Mum, what am I going to do when my granddad dies? Because I could see it coming. I'd been told that was how this ended. And my mum said to me, you'll know when the time comes. And I can remember thinking, that is infuriatingly unhelpful. Because I want to know now, so I can deal with it now, because I don't want it to happen. So if I can deal with it now, it'll be better when it does happen. But what my mum was actually doing was, well, she was doing 2 things. She was firstly explaining to me that coping mechanisms are rarely early. They are what I call just in time. You know how to deal with something when it happens. You have a car accident, you don't drive along, you think, I know what I'm going to do if I have a car accident. If you have a car accident, you deal with it once it's happened. So she was teaching me this just-in-time principle for coping mechanisms. The other thing that she was doing was she was giving me the emotional freedom as a kid to react to his death however I needed to. And that was a kindness, because I was a kid. I could then do that without any fear of adult judgment, which was a blessing. But I then had to grow up, obviously, and go out into the real world. And for some inexplicable reason, I chose tech because, tech's not fast moving at all, right? And I came across a lot more changes than I did in my early childhood, and I'm going to touch on some of them now. There is a big delay on this, and I'm too scared to click it again. There we go. Right choice, Helen. Okay, so changes in our industry. First one I'm going to talk about is acquisitions and mergers. I hear they're called mergers in the States. I gave this talk as a kind of early run-through with one of my friends in America, and she's like, I don't know what acquisitions are, Helen. So acquisitions and mergers. I've been through loads of them. Many of you in the audience have probably been through them as well, and if you haven't, you might well do. Changes in our office space. We spend a lot of time at work, and where we work and how our environment impacts us is really important, especially going into and coming out of, if that's a thing, COVID. Our team. We can't choose them, can we? Like our family. People leave, people join, you leave, you join. So we're going to talk about changes in our team as well. Our workload. workloads change, and sometimes we control them, and sometimes we don't. And that can be quite frustrating. So I'm going to give you some tips and tricks there. Lastly, jobs. So when we change jobs, we get a new job, we leave a job, some tips and tricks there. Now, a lot of this presentation, the tips and tricks that I'm going to give you, are for those of you who are impacted by change, which is everybody in the room, one would hope. Some of the tips are for the leaders and managers in the room. So if you're a leader or a manager, I've got some tips that are specific to you as well. Okay. Acquisitions and mergers. That's a fun old topic, isn't it? So I once, I was working, this is way back in the day, very long time ago, and I walked into my, I was just taking my first technical writing job, actually, and I walked into my, my desk one day, and on my desk was a cute little box of branded jelly beans, and a branded pen for the company that had acquired us. That was the communication that we got. A little box of jelly beans. I don't even like jelly beans. The moral of this story, because I was made redundant from my role 3 months later, the moral of this story and the tip I want to give you is take note of how the communication around any acquisition or merger is handled. If you come into work one day to find some, frankly, weird branded swag on your desk, that may not be a good sign of things to come. Contrast that with a more recent acquisition, and there's at least one person in the audience who went through this acquisition with me, so potentially two actually. We were all taken down to the boardroom. We were communicated to. It was quite a complicated one because 3 companies all came together. The name changed 2, if not 3 times. But the point is, we were communicated to at every step of the way. And that was really helpful because we got to know the process, we got to understand what was happening, we were told as and when, we didn't find out from a third party. Second tip around acquisitions and mergers is do your research. So what I mean by that is when you go through an acquisition or a merger, people say nothing will change, the company values won't change, everything's going to stay the same. Bad news, it won't, and it never does. And it never does because the people at the top change. And I'm not saying it's going to change for the worst, it might change for the better, but it will change. So don't necessarily reach out to the leadership, but find out who the leadership are. Maybe you're now venture capitalist owned. Maybe you were venture capitalist owned and now you're not. Find out who's in charge, find out who's at the top of the hierarchy, find out what they stand for, find out what their values are. And do you align with those values? And do you agree with those values? Because there is no shame in saying, if you've announced the company's announced it's going through an acquisition, there's no shame in saying, you know what, this isn't for me. I just don't want to work here anymore. Because there's been a number of times in my career where I should have gone, actually, not really digging it, going to move on. And I stuck it, and I shouldn't have. And I stuck it for 3 months, 6 months, 2 years before I went, I really hate this job. And I want to leave. So know who your new leaders are and understand what their values are and find out if they align to your values. The third tip on this one is be transparent. This is an awful cell phone story. Recent acquisition, by recent I mean in the last 5 years, we're not talking in the noughties. And a company acquired us, I was the technical writer there, and I got this email and it said, please can you share the product documentation with us? Right, perfectly civil email. Unfortunately for them, what I saw and what I read was, please give me your baby. So what then ensued was a really difficult conversation between me and the acquiring company because, of course, they had every right to the product documentation. Of course they did. It wasn't my baby. I mean, I wrote it, sure, but it was the product documentation. I should have just handed it over, but I didn't. I got all awkward and weird about it, which is probably why I'm writing this presentation. But the moral of the story here is just be transparent. That new company don't know anything about you. You don't know anything about them. You're both people, in this case, people in the UK, people in the States, and you don't need to make the communication any harder by misreading a perfectly innocent request, like I unfortunately did that day. Okay. I have clicked it. We have to be patient. Okay. New offices. we spend a lot of time at work, right? That's a thing. So new offices. Where shall I start with this one? Let's start with the elephant in the room. March 2020. It's only recently I'm convinced it's not still March 2020. March 2020, the vast majority of us were sent home from work with our laptops and told, you're working from home for a bit. Didn't really know what was coming, but it wasn't just that, was it? Not only were we sent home from work, many of us, had children at home who couldn't be in nursery or school unless one of us was a key worker. And it wasn't just that. Many of us had vulnerable people in our immediate circle, people we were terrified were going to get this thing that was, very little was known about. Arguably still very little is known about. So we had all this double whammy of suddenly we were working from home, we had family at home, we had people we were worried about at home, we had a constant onslaught of TV and news, and it was not good. But the point is, now we are returning to our offices. The world has changed. We might have had more kids at home now, it's been 2 years. The world has changed, and many of us found that we liked working from home. And the reason that I'm telling you this story is I know a lot of companies are encouraging people to go back to the office. And if you've been working on the dining room table for 2 years and you're sick to death of it and you want to go back to the office, good for you. Go, enjoy. If you found that you've been working from home and you've been really enjoying it and you want to stay there, and perhaps you've moved house and perhaps you've got your own little cute office, and now you've got a company saying, they want you to come back into work Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Don't. Update your CV. You spend a lot of your time at work. I know that sounds really brutal, but you want to be happy, right? You spend hours and hours and hours there. If you actually enjoy working from home, don't be afraid to go, actually, that's enough of a driver for me to consider changing roles. Perfectly legit, perfectly acceptable. Next tip I want to give you on office space is beware the gimmicks. Gimmicks/perks. Now, I'm not saying these are bad, but I am talking about the free breakfast, the on-site gym, the parking, maybe you get an amount of money to spend on lunch for your employer to bring some sandwiches in or something like that. Pools, tables, crazy golf. Oh yes, I've worked in an office with crazy golf. These are all fine and good, but make sure they work for you. And make sure they work for you because they are almost all exclusively designed to keep you in the office longer. And maybe that's fine, and maybe that works for you. Maybe you want to drive into work, because God knows the M60, and then you want to drive into work, you want to do a workout in a gym that's not a chain gym and it's not crowded, you want to have a shower at work, you want to go upstairs, you want to grab a couple of slices of toast, and you want to start your job. And maybe that works really well for you, and it did for me for many years. But if you're one of these people that you're like, actually, none of those things are really perks for me because I need to drop my little one off at nursery and then my slightly less little one off at school, and I'm going to be driving in rush hour anyway, so these aren't really perks for me, then, factor that in when you're making these decisions, because where we work and what's available to us is really important as far as I'm concerned. Like I say, we spend a lot of our time there. And there is a third point which I've forgotten. How could I forget the best story? Right, changing office locations. So imagine this story, or imagine the scene. We are a small software company. I haven't given any names, but I kind of want to name this one because they were so awesome at doing this. They've since been acquired by an arm of Tesco. But we were a small software company, 20, 25 people. We had outgrown our space in Manchester, so the business needed to take out a new office lease somewhere. And now they could have just done this, right? This is a really easy thing to do. That's what we have business management functions for, or office management functions. But they didn't do that. They took all of us, all 20 to 25 of us, on a day trip. And we toured these 3 different office spaces that they had shortlisted for us. And then they asked us for our feedback. And we were like, okay, this is weird. So we gave our feedback, like, we really like that expensive one in City Tower because the views are amazing, and we like all the natural light and everything and so forth. And they went, okay, fine. And they took a lease out. Mind blown. I was like, hang on a minute, we picked the most expensive one, you took us on a day trip, so you lost money there, and I'm pretty sure they bought us lunch as well. And what a wonderful, wonderful way to handle change. They included us. It was really disruptive. You know, going from, where were we, Oxford Road, up to City Tower, it's not a massive distance. But if you're always commuting into Oxford Road, maybe you come in on the train, it's a bit of a hike all the way up to City Tower, right? So it was a really nice way. So if you're a leader or a manager in the room and you're in charge of handling change, that's a really nice way of doing it, by including people. Okay, let's be patient for the clicker. Okay, we've got a thing going now. Your team. Yes, like I said, they're kind of like your family, and you can't really choose them, which is frustrating. But look at this from two perspectives. When you join a team, take note of your onboarding. So what I mean by that is when you walk into the office or you start your first day remotely, whichever it is your laptop ready? Is your account set up? Is your password there? Are your accounts set up? What else? Is there swag? Now, swag shouldn't matter. It really shouldn't matter. And it's not the be-all and end-all. But a company that produces nice swag, by the way, if you're in charge of one of these, I'd really like one. So would Kim, by the way. Swag can be a really nice way to show value. Bear in mind that company has spent thousands recruiting you. If you can then start your first day and your laptop's there and your accounts are set up and you're good to go and maybe you can even do something more useful than fix a bug, that's a really nice onboarding experience to go through. Now, this is not the be-all and end-all. I've had amazing jobs that had kind of crappy onboarding experiences, and I've had amazing onboarding experiences and the job hasn't been all that much crack. So it's just a marker that you can look at to kind of have a look and see if this is something that you want to do. If you have people joining your team, this is like a pet peeve of mine, please show them where the coffee machine is, show them where their desk is, and show them where the toilets are. The number of times I've had to ask in a new job, office space, where are the toilets? So welcome them, take them to the pub, especially now, we're able to do that kind of stuff, onboard them nicely. Leaving a team, we all do that, and I have a little bit of a pet peeve about the saying, people don't leave, let's see if I can get it right now, people don't leave good jobs, they leave bad managers. Saying goes something like that, right? I kind of agree with it, but I kind of don't agree with it because I have left really good managers. And I have left good managers because they have leveled me up and I'm then ready to take the next step. And I can't always take the next step at that company. So I had a wonderful, wonderful manager. She was based out of London. I was based here in Manchester. And I got on the train and I went down to see her Monday morning, walked in through, and she sat down with her coffee and I hit her with my resignation. And she got up and she gave me the warmest hug. She was just genuinely happy for me. We're still good friends to this day. She genuinely cares about me and my career. She cares about me, she cares where it's going, and she did her job. That's what great leaders do. They level people up and they move them on. So it's not always, for me, that saying is, it's not always true. I've left good managers and I've left good managers for good reasons because they have leveled me up and I'm ready to move on to the next thing. Still talking about leaving. Try not to burn your bridges. Bit of an obvious one. I have, at times, burnt my bridges. I have a fiery temper. So yeah, try not to burn your bridges, but also if you are a leader or a manager in the room and somebody comes to you and resigns, please then don't ignore them for the rest of eternity. It's really mean, and I've had it happen to me. So likewise, if you resign to somebody and then your manager stops talking to you, maybe you've made the right decision. Okay, the clicker's not giving me a chance for a drink now, it's like on it. Your workload. Now, your workload can change very, very quickly. I discovered this, is that go faster? Okay, sorry. I'm trying to do the sign language at the back of the room, sorry. It is go faster, right? Okay, we're gonna go fast now. Right. Workload, really important. You don't always have control of it. So certainly when I was doing technical writing, it can be quite peaky, it can be quite trophy. Decide what works for you. Please remember on this one, you can have too much work. That's the most common use case, burnout, whole separate conference talk. You can also burn out by having too little work. Let that sink in for a moment. You can burn out from having too little work by your skills not being valued and you not being, I hate the word utilised, I'm about to use it, utilised by the company. If you do find you have too much work, one tip you can do, take an inventory of all your meetings. Find out where everything's at. Where is all your time going? Okay, speed past that one. Right, change in role, fun one. First tip here, use your probation period wisely. I left my job as a Java developer advocate in December. As of last week, I'm back as a Java developer advocate at the same company. I took a role for 3 months as a keynote storyteller. It didn't work out for me. I was in my probation period, and I said, you know what? This isn't working for me. I'm not enjoying it as much as I thought I would. There were a lot of different changes at the organization at the time, so use your probation period wisely. It's not about eating humble pie. It's just about phoning your old boss and going, I don't really like it. Can I come back? Perfectly legit. What were my other tips on change in role? Probation period. Sideways moves. So don't be afraid to do a sideways move. So for example, if I was to survey all the job titles in this room, there'd probably be about 40 of them. You know, when you're at school, it's like fill in a questionnaire and you will be a librarian and you will be a doctor and you will be an astrophysicist. Mine never said that. But the tech is very nuanced. There are so many job titles out there. I've done development, technical writing, developer advocacy, keynote storytelling, product owner. There's lots out there. You have a whole bunch of transferable skills. So deny your critics and step out on your own, because you absolutely can do this and you have got the skills. That's the clicker going slow. Right, summaries. Do's for leaders of change. Be transparent. Explain the context behind your decisions, please. Be inclusive and include people at every step of the way. Give people choices. Let people know what their options are. Share what you know and celebrate people. Be happy for people when they leave your team. You've done your job and you've done it well. And plan people's onboarding meticulously. If you're impacted by change, I apologize, this is the only Barry reference in the whole presentation. Get in front of it. Stand, turn around, face the strange, look at it, understand it, stalk it if you have to. Find out information and inform yourself. Talk to your peers. Share what you know. Once again, you're a team. You're all in it together. Again, celebrate new starters, celebrate leavers, be happy for them, even if it's kind of dropped you in the poo a bit. For you, just sometimes it's better just to cut your losses and leave. Sometimes it's just not worth it. Give yourself time. You know, when something crappy happens and you think, I'm feeling really annoyed now, go to sleep, wake up, it'll be less crappy. Give yourself time to grow your coping mechanisms. They are just in time, they are rarely early. And don't be afraid. You have got this. So remember, change is scary. Change is hard, but you have the tools. You all have the tools. It's completely inevitable. And it can make the impossible possible. So like I said at the start of the presentation, please remember that you control more than you think you do. That QR code will take you to that link, which is on my website, which has all the do's and don'ts, and thank you very much.